The stars above had always seemed eternal, glittering guardians of a sky that had watched over humanity since its first breath. But on the night when SpaceX's colossal Starship rocket lit its engines and tore away from Earth's grip, the heavens themselves seemed to tremble, for this was not just another leap forward in technology, not just another milestone of private spaceflight. This was the beginning of a journey whispered to be darker, more dangerous, and more fateful than anything attempted before. A mission to the moon's hidden side, the hemisphere no human eye has ever seen directly, the silent face turned eternally away from Earth, a face that has lured imaginations, birthed myths, and fueled fears for thousands of years, and the Starship, gleaming silver against the inferno of its launch flames, carried more than astronauts and instruments into the void. It carried centuries of unanswered questions. Questions seeded by anomalies no scientist could dismiss, strange bursts of light erupting from crater rims without cause, magnetic scars that twisted compasses wildly, seismic quakes that echoed like hollow drums through the lunar crust, and even signals, faint, fragmented whispers, that radio astronomers had intercepted from that concealed side, signals that some dismissed as static but others believed to be structured, almost like coded messages. And as the rocket soared higher, the flames beneath it cutting through the black like a sword, billions on Earth watched with awe, unaware that the deeper objective of this mission was not just to land but to pierce the silence, to confront the dark side's mysteries that had haunted the archives of Apollo, mysteries buried in classified files, fragments of audio cut from transmissions, photographs airbrushed to erase towers, domes, and geometric shadows that seemed far too deliberate to be natural. And as Starship broke free into the vacuum of space, its engines falling silent, the Earth dwindling into a fragile blue marble below, the astronauts inside felt the crushing weight of destiny, because they knew that when they entered lunar orbit and slipped behind the moon, contact with Earth would vanish, leaving them alone with whatever had been waiting in that eternal shadow since time before memory. And though their training had hardened them, though their words for the cameras would be calm and scripted, their private thoughts burned with the fear no one dared voice aloud. What if the far side was not empty? What if what lay hidden there was not meant to be found? What if their mission was not one of discovery but of awakening something ancient, something that had watched silently as humanity reached upward, waiting until the moment we finally crossed into its domain? And now, with Starship blazing its path toward the dark frontier, the line between exploration and intrusion was being crossed. And the universe was holding its breath to see what would happen when human feet pressed against the forgotten face of the moon, when the drills reached into its bones, when the cameras pierced its shadows, and when the silence of the hidden side was broken at last by voices not of gods or myths but of fragile human beings daring to ask questions that might unravel the fabric of everything we thought we knew about who we are, and why we are here. And why we are here. A question that echoed like a drumbeat in the minds of the crew as the Starship drifted through the darkness, Earth shrinking into a speck of blue and white while the silver hull hummed with the life of machines keeping fragile human hearts alive, the silence of space pressing against the windows until the astronauts began to feel the weight of their solitude, the knowledge that no other humans had ever dared to fly so directly into the unseen face of the moon, the place that countless cultures had woven into myths of gods, demons, spirits, and watchers. And yet beneath those myths was something colder, something written in data, unexplained gravitational anomalies charted by satellites, strange shadows captured in early Apollo photographs, recordings of metallic echoes during seismic tests as if the moon's crust was hollow, and even the unspoken rumors passed in whispers among engineers, that the far side held not just rocks and craters but traces of structures, patterns, and perhaps something left behind before humanity ever existed. And as the hours stretched into days, the crew rehearsed their descent procedures, their voices calm and clipped over the intercoms. But in their private quarters, when the cameras were off, the weight of the mission became a quiet storm, for each of them knew that once they slipped behind the moon, communications with Earth would cut off, leaving them utterly alone. And there was something about that severing that stirred unease in the deepest parts of their minds, because it wasn't just silence they would face. It was the possibility that something was waiting in that silence, something that had been hidden for eons and might not welcome the trespass of human machines. And so when the moon grew larger in their windows, its bright familiar face illuminated by the sun, the crew felt a shiver knowing that in just a few orbits, they would swing around the edge into the darkness where no sunlight reached, No Earthlight touched, and no human eye had ever gazed directly. A place of craters so deep they seemed to swallow starlight, of plains of black dust stretching endlessly, of jagged mountains casting shadows like teeth, and as the Starship adjusted its trajectory, its engines firing with thunderous bursts, the astronauts strapped themselves in, their eyes fixed on the monitors, their hands steady but their thoughts racing with what lay ahead, for the dark side was not just a geographical frontier, it was a psychological abyss. A place where the imagination filled the void with whatever terrors it could conjure, and in the control rooms. Back on Earth, though Mission Control spoke in the same clipped, professional tones it always had, there was an unspoken tension in the air. For even the highest-ranking officials knew that hidden within the mission's objectives were classified instructions, fragments of files pulled from deep within NASA's archives, files that mentioned signals that had been intercepted, pulses that repeated like a heartbeat, recordings that seemed to carry patterns beyond randomness, and though most of the world believed this was merely another bold step for humanity, a test of engineering and endurance, the truth was that this mission was designed to answer questions no one dared ask publicly. Questions that had gnawed at the edges of science for decades. Was the moon only a celestial body? Or was it something more, an ancient sentinel, an artifact, or even a construct left by hands unknown? And as the Starship began its final orbital maneuver, slipping into the shadow, the Earth disappeared. Behind the horizon, the radios fell into static, and the cabin was suddenly filled with the sound of their own breathing, the hum of machinery, and the vast, crushing silence of being cut off. And in that silence, as the far side revealed itself on the monitors for the first time, the astronauts gasped, because what lay beneath them was not the barren, untouched wasteland they had been taught to expect. It was a landscape marked by scars that looked too symmetrical, ridges that curved in patterns almost geometric, craters whose rims aligned in ways that defied coincidence, and far below, glimmers of reflection that no natural rock should have given, like the cold gleam of metal half buried in dust. And though they tried to convince themselves it was merely geological coincidence, the unease in their voices betrayed them as they recorded every detail. Their words destined to be transmitted later but in this moment kept within the capsule, a secret between themselves and the ancient moon, and as they passed deeper into the shadow, one of the crew members swore he saw a flicker, a burst of faint light from within a crater, gone as quickly as it appeared, but long enough to make the hairs on their necks rise. Long enough to remind them that perhaps they were not the first to tread this frontier, perhaps they were being watched, and with every passing second, the dark side seemed less like an untouched frontier and more like a stage, waiting for the curtain to rise on. A truth humanity had never been prepared to face, a truth buried not just in dust and stone but in the very fabric of why the moon had always shown only one face to Earth, why it had kept its secrets locked away in eternal night, and why, now, as the Starship cut across its shadows, those secrets were on the verge of being unveiled, no matter what danger that unveiling might bring.